we then call this meeting to order, and we'll start with roll call.
Okay. Roll call. Chair Piotrowski,
Here.
and you're in.
Oh, that's right.
city.
I'm in Lathrup Village, Oakland County, Michigan.
Okay. Vice Chair Hammond,
Present, participating from Lathrup Village, Michigan and Oakland County.
and Secretary Thompson. Board Member Fobbs. Board Member Hulieza.
Attending from Lathrup Village, Oakland County, Michigan.
Board Member Cantor.
Present here in Lathrup Village, Michigan, Oakland County.
And Board Member Stansberry.
Present here in Lathrup Village, Oakland County, Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll move on to the first item on the agenda, which is approval of the agenda. Is there any questions, comments, or
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second,
those in favor? Roll call.
Board Member Fobbs. Board Member Hammond.
yes.
Board Member Hulieza.
Aye.
Board Member Cantor.
Yes.
Chair Piotrowski.
Yes.
Board Member Stansberry.
Aye.
And Board Member Thompson. Motion carried to approve the agenda.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the public hearing for the Primary Caregiver Overlay District Ordinance.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry to chime in, but are you guys going to excuse the two people who are not present this evening?
I just before you do that, I did hear from Anna. She has class tonight, which is why she is not in attendance. I did not, however, hear from Will.
I'll make a motion to excuse Anna Thompson from the meeting.
Second.
Okay, those in favor? Yeah.
And I'll call roll again, and that will be Chair Piotrowski.
Aye.
This is to excuse, and Vice Chair Hammond,
Yes.
and Board Member Hulieza,
Aye.
and Board Member Cantor,
Yes.
and Board Member Stansberry.
Aye.
And Board Member Fobbs, did he come on yet? No? Okay, motion carried to excuse Secretary Anna Thompson. Thank you.
Okay. I guess we'll move on to item 4, public hearing, Primary Caregiver Overlay District Ordinance. Checking here to see if we have any parties in the audience. Guess we'll officially open the public hearing. We ask that any participants who would care to, I guess, address the commission on this particular issue, when given or provided permission to address the council and the commission, that we state your name, your address, the location where you are attending from, and we have a 3-minute limit.
And Mr. Chairman, if we could ask anyone in the audience who wishes to address this body, if they would either raise their hand or enter a question in the chat room.
Okay. And if there is, I guess to start this off, if there isn't an initial question, is there any introduction we need to provide to the public before we go ahead and entertain questions? Or
there is, I'd be happy to do it. Scott, if you want to maybe do the first introduction, I can do the language for the ordinance.
Yeah, so let me, okay. So what this is here that tonight, this is just a brief overview of this amendment to the zoning ordinance and the purpose of it. This deals with primary caregivers under the 2008 legislative ballot language. Currently in the city, there are no regulations pertaining to these particular users, which means that they can operate anywhere within the city without any guidance or oversight from the city, no regulation other than what's identified in the 2008 Act, which is not a lot. So this had come to the attention of the city, and with the city moving forward with recreational marijuana and medical marijuana, it made sense to do this now. And not only does it provide a framework for regulation similar to what is going to be applied to users that potential users for recreational or medical marijuana, but it's also going to identify an area within the city where these particular uses will be accepted, where we can fit them in and with appropriate conditions for doing that, to minimize the impact on the adjoining businesses and the adjoining neighbors. So you have had an opportunity. This has been provided you before in your packet. I guess if there's any, again, we'll open it up to public comment because the public hearing is still open. And if there's no comments from the public, then we can move forward with the overview from Jill and then questions from the Planning Commission.
not seeing any hands being raised or any questions being posted at this point. So guess we'll make motion to close the public hearing.
You don't actually have to make a motion to close it. You can just note that it's been closed and then move
Okay.
on to the next item.
We'll officially close that portion meeting here, and we'll, I guess, move on to just the overview.
All right. Now I have a PowerPoint that I sent ahead to the city last week, and I believe it was posted on the city's website in case there were members of the community that were interested in understanding this a little bit more detail. I don't know. I can do that for you here, and I can maybe go through it quickly just for the benefit of any public that is in attendance. Although most of it will be a repeat for all of you because I've kind of gone through it before, but I can go through it a little bit more quickly if you'd like.
I think that makes sense, Jill.
Okay. All right, so, oops, I moved this. All right, can you still see that?
Yep.
I've got the presentation, yep, on my screen.
It says my screen sharing is paused. I don't know what that means. Oh, resume share. Okay, because I moved it. I moved the screen so that I could look at you instead of off to the side. Okay, so we've talked through some of the differences in some of the terminology between marijuana or cannabis, and we've talked about moving to the term cannabis consistent with industry as it's emerging, but also to reflect some of the negative connotations associated with the words marijuana. You'll remember that there are 3 laws in the state of Michigan that pertain to marijuana or cannabis. Those are the Medical Marijuana Act, the Medical Marijuana Facility Licensing Act, and the Regulation Taxation of Marijuana Act. So with the first one from 2008, this allowed the state to register primary caregivers, and then those registered caregivers could serve qualifying patients up to 5, those who are prescribed from a doctor. That allows the qualifying patient themselves to grow 12 plants for their personal use. And it also allows the registered caregivers to also grow and sell limited amounts of cannabis for their qualifying patients. Again, they can serve up to 5 patients, and they can grow plants for themselves. So that means that they can grow a maximum of 72 plants. So the state law said that caregiver grow operations were like any other permitted uses, that zoning cannot entirely exclude them. However, the city is able to adopt ordinances that comply with those 3 acts pertaining to cannabis. Primary caregivers shall be permitted, and the city can choose whether to permit those other marijuana facilities. In terms of primary caregivers, the city is not able to regulate how many registered caregivers are permitted in the community, but there are regulations, or the city may have regulations on the other types of marijuana facilities permitted by the MMFLA and the MRTMA, which should be that. And you can do this through zoning. So you can have reasonable local zoning regulations, however, that apply to registered caregivers and all of the other cannabis facilities as well. Primarily, most communities now are recognizing, thanks to the Michigan Supreme Court ruling last year, that a community may adopt zoning standards to regulate primary caregiver uses, provided that it doesn't prohibit or penalize the cultivation of medical marijuana, and the municipality does not impose regulations that are unreasonable and inconsistent with regulations established by state law. So essentially, communities aren't able to zone out effectively this type of use. And there's different ways that that can happen, whether not providing any area for it, or making it very difficult to find a parcel where this would be permitted. Some of the other things that we can address through zoning include some of these items that we've got listed here: interior and exterior improvements, visibility, safety, and waste management. So for this proposed zoning amendment, as city attorney outlined, the need to regulate primary caregivers, we do see that indoor cultivation, which is primarily where this happens when it's occurring in residential areas, requires large quantities of water and electricity. Frequently, grow lights are running all day long into the evening. And right now, because the zoning ordinance is silent on this regulation, they can really be anywhere right now, including residential neighborhoods. So in thinking about how we would regulate this type of use in the city, we thought that really there's really no reason why these are consistent or compatible with residential uses in residential districts. So that was one area that we wanted to make sure that they're not provided in. But even though they do have a commercial use of electricity, water, and other utilities, they are fairly low intensity in terms of traffic and parking. And that low intensity nature is more similar to office uses in the office district, primarily located on 12 Mile Road. 12 Mile Road is a major thoroughfare. It does have limited cut-through access into the city's residential neighborhoods. So some of the standards that would apply for primary caregivers through the zoning amendment is that the ordinance will require a minimum of 750 feet per floor area per caregiver operation, and allow up to 3 caregiver operations in one building. Each building or each operation must be enclosed and secured. There's no outdoor growing permitted. And the facilities have to be designed and maintained similar to other buildings in the district. So essentially, the city is saying that these uses may go in this district, but from all respects, when driving down 12 Mile Road, there really should be no difference in appearance between a building that has primary caregivers and one that does not. Again, outdoor storage is permitted. Odor from the operation shall not be discernible outside of the caregiver facility. That was something that we talked about with the Planning Commission when we first discussed this at our last meeting. Distribution on site is prohibited. Consumption on site is prohibited. Alcohol on site is prohibited. Signs are prohibited, but in permits or inspections are required. So we'll do that to make sure that, that these facilities are adequately designed to allow for the growing of the cannabis while not creating issues with pests, mold, mildew, odors, as well as then to make sure that going forward that there's no noise or dust or vibration, glare, and fumes that are associated as typical nuisances that we would regulate in the zoning ordinance. We also want to make sure that interior construction and design doesn't impede any current or future use of a building for other uses as permitted in the office district. Site plan review will be required for all caregiver facilities. And then this is our next step. We're having the public hearing and then action will follow. All right, now I can stop. Okay, so with that, some of the changes since the last time the Planning Commission and City Council had a chance to take a look at this. We did note, we had some discussion with Council at the meeting at the study session on Monday about additional school properties and the realization that there's another school in the city of Southfield, a charter school on the north side of 12 Mile east of Southfield Road. Once we put that in place with the buffer requirements that we had originally imposed with this standard, we lost more parcels, almost half probably, of the parcels that we had originally thought we would have available in the office district. So in further study with this, we did look at other communities. It's hard to find somebody that's exactly the same as Lathrup Village in terms of its size, its configuration, and its effort to regulate this use in this way. It does seem, though, that a buffer maybe isn't necessarily required in this case. And so only for this use, as you know, we've been talking about the regulation of other cannabis facilities in the city. There's no change at this time for the buffer requirements for those. But for the primary caregivers, in as much as there are no buffers currently, and they're allowed in residential districts, in an effort to get them out of the residential districts and give them ample opportunity in the office district, we're proposing to remove the buffers at this time. So that was really the main change, I think, since our last conversation. Looking through it. Yeah, I think that was all. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So any caregiver that would want to get approval from City Council to operate under this ordinance, well, it's by right, right? So it's all
Right.
there's no restriction on the number. It's but there is restriction on the location that it's got to be in the office district.
Correct, and it will need site plan review by the Planning Commission.
Got it.
Well, there is to some degree a limit on the number, right? Because it's 3 per facility maximum.
Right, right.
There's limits on the number of caregivers that can operate in any single facility, but there's no
Overall limit.
caregivers that can operate in the city other than what's limited by the offices in the office district that house them. Okay. That's my question I had.
Jill, if you eliminate the buffer, does it mean it can now be in residential?
No, it's only in the office district.
Only in, just as long as it stays in the office district?
Correct.
Okay. Do you think there's going to be an issue if there's no buffer for this, but there's buffer for the other two, that there'll be a conflict that somebody may bring up?
Scott, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, no, and I really don't think there is. And part of our discussion around this was the rationale behind the buffer is primarily to address those retail type uses where you're having people coming in and out. There's a lot of product being transferred, the potential for product to be transferred to school-age children or school-age children to watch the product being transferred. this particular use, there's no on-site, it's not a retail use. There's no on-site, there's no traffic in and out of it. If they comply with all the other components of this ordinance, you could walk by it and you're not going to smell it. You're not going to know what's there. It's going to be a very low intensity type of use. And that was ultimately why we decided to eliminate the buffer requirement for this particular use.
Okay.
Jill Charo here. In removing the buffer, was there an attempt to reach out to that particular school to assess the reaction?
No, we did not.
And that would be the city of Southfield?
Correct.
And what are typically the standard protocols for cities that might be involved in this sort of arrangement?
Well, it depends on the use. I mean, you raise a good point. There are times when communities will confer with the other communities or make an advisement that, hey, we're making a change on our border that we share. Although in this case, I think it's a little bit different because all of us have to allow these uses, the primary caregivers. So not only does this, I mean, we have them now in the residential neighborhoods, which could end up being very proximate to a school. Now, in that case, with that particular one, no, but perhaps near the high school, there could be another situation where there's a home right next to the high school in which this use is taking place. So it didn't seem that it was a necessary effort.
And just as a point of a hypothetical, if we retain the buffer, if we had a buffer and there was a facility, whether inside or outside Lathrup Village, and this situation would create a situation where properties might no longer be available for a school type purpose or another purpose that needed to remain outside of that zone. Does it work in that direction? And would that have been a concern?
Okay, so let me see if I understand your question. If we were limiting an area based on a current school that was in place today, but then next year the school went away, does that open up that parcel?
That's another way of looking at it as well. Or does would the placement of a facility of a facility, a caregiver facility, or we could go outside of that and talk about the other facilities as well, prohibit a school from occupying a space that would be within the zone.
Right. So if we had a buffer in place and there wasn't a school, but we had a cannabis facility and then a school wanted to go in next door, usually the ordinance is whatever is in place at the time. So if a new school came along, it would be a good idea for them to understand what uses are around them, but it wouldn't prohibit the school from locating there. And it wouldn't prohibit the cannabis facility from continuing to be there because they were there first.
All right.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Good. Okay. Well, I guess at this point we can move on to the next item on the agenda, the new business, which is the primary caregiver overlay district. And we're looking for Planning Commission action to advise the City Council on whether we recommend approval or denial of the primary caregiver overlay district. So if there are no further questions, given the presentation that we've received today, we'll entertain a motion to recommend approval.
Yeah, so I'll recommend approval of a adjustment to city ordinance, amendment to the city ordinance to allow for the primary caregiver overlay district as written in the proposed language of the ordinance amendment.
I second.
Okay, those in favor? Roll call.
Roll call. Board Member Fobbs,
Aye.
Board Member Hammond,
Yes.
Board Member Julieza,
Aye.
Board Member Cantor,
Yes.
Chair Pietrowski,
Aye.
Board Member Stansberry.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is public comment. Okay. Not hearing any comments or seeing any hands being raised. We'll move on to, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn the planning commission meeting.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
All right, you're adjourned.
Yeah. Don't need a-
Yeah.
Adjourned.
I'll call to order the Lathrup Village City Council. Madam Clerk, could you take roll call, please?
Yes, roll call. Mayor Garrett,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cantor,
Here. Oh, and
Councilmember
Lathrup
Ferguson.
Village, Michigan,
Oh.
Oakland County.
that's right.
Sorry.
And Councilmember Ferguson. Absent. Councilmember Siddiqui,
Here, Lathrup Village, Oakland County, Michigan.
and Councilmember Stallings.
You're on mute, Donna, if you're there.
No, nothing.
I'm here.
Madam
Oakland
Mayor, you
County.
have,
Mhm.
okay. Thank you. Madam Mayor, you have a quorum.
In Oakland County. Take a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Can we make a motion to excuse Councilman Ferguson first, please?
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to, oh, did you already make it?
Yeah,
No.
just second me.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Can you take a roll call, please?
Yes. Roll call. Mayor Pro Tem Cantor,
Yes.
Councilmember Siddiqui,
Yes.
Councilmember Stallings,
Yes.
Mayor Garrett.
Yes.
Motion carried to excuse Councilmember Ferguson from this meeting.
Thank
Make a
you.
motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Roll call. Mayor Pro Tem Cantor,
Yes.
Councilmember Siddiqui,
Yes.
Councilmember Stallings,
Yes.
Mayor Garrett.
Yes.
Motion carried to approve the agenda.
Thank you. New business, primary caregiver overlay districts. Who would like to present it? City attorney,
Scott, do you want to go or do you want me to do?
anybody?
If I can, so all the council members were present during the planning commission meeting. They heard the overview given by myself and Jill. For the sake of this meeting introduction, again, briefly, this is a proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance that would create an overlay district specifically for primary caregiver under the 2008 Voter Initiative Medical Marijuana Act. So yeah, that's quick introduction. Unless there's any questions, we can go over it again.
But I just want to make sure that I understand that this is being presented to us to approve without a buffer from schools in here, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Who would like to make that motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve an ordinance to amend the City of Lathrup Village zoning ordinance Article 2 to add definitions for cannabis facilities, Article 3 to add licensed primary giver facilities as permitted uses, and to add Article 4 to add specific standards for licensed caregivers. Will be effective upon publication.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I do. I just have a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm not feeling the non-buffer for the schools. So I just wanted to say that I think that it is important to have the buffers for the schools. So I just wanted to say that.
So I'm in full agreement with you. So that's what I was going to ask you about the suggested motion. Should these be done individually, or do these have to be done all together? Because you're going to be in a deadlock, because I can tell you ahead of time, I'm not going to vote for it without buffers in place. And now you have even amount of council people here. Well, I mean, and I'm assuming Councilwoman Stallings is not going to vote for it either. So.
No.
Well, I guess, can I ask what the concern is with the buffer? Why the hesitation? If it's not a retail use, and there is no in and out, there won't be any odor, there won't be any transferring of it. I guess I'm not following the concern over the requirement for the buffer.
And I would say more importantly, Scott, the fact that there's no buffer right now. So there could be a primary caregiver that's within 100 or 200 feet of the school at this point, because there are houses that are that close and they could be primary caregivers.
Well, one, I will say this, and not to be totally who I really am, is because it's not where I'm required to agree with it. But I don't agree with it because I think that we do need to have a buffer to the schools. I know what it says for the law. It also says don't speed down Southfield Road, and people still do it. So it's not, that doesn't give me comfort to say that they won't be transferring something outside of a business in front of the school. And I feel comfortable, or I would be able to sleep better at night knowing that I try not to have marijuana around, even under the guise of medical, around children. That's my thoughts. Councilwoman Stallings, did you want to give your thoughts behind it? I mean, I don't know if it's really, well, you want to give your thoughts behind it?
Those are my thoughts behind it. I'm not, this too, by the way, is simply to vote on the ordinance, not necessarily the businesses that are coming in. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I've been out on, pardon me?
This is just for the primary caregiver facilities, and this would remove them from the residential neighborhoods where they currently are able to locate with no buffer, and concentrate them in one area of the city where they'd be regulated.
Primary caregivers who have responsibility for no more than 5
Correct.
patients.
Correct. Except that in one building, you could have 3 caregivers. And obviously, if each of those has 5 patients, now we have 15, but there's no distribution on site.
Okay, so this is strictly for the primary caregivers with 5 or less patients, but I'm still, Kelly, you explained it. Take caution.
I would just say, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I think, there's no retail, there's no in and out, as Scott and Jill explained. I don't have a concern with allowing a facility with no buffer. I mean, that's kind of where I'm at. I don't see a problem with it. I think we need to give them a place to go. I think if we provide some kind of buffer, they're very limited. And they might not have any place to locate within the city if we're keeping them in the office space location.
Yeah,
So-
the ordinance also gives us the ability to control it, whereas if we turn down the ordinance, then we have no control over it whatsoever.
No, we can continue with the discussion, or would you like to take the vote?
Let's take the vote.
Roll call, please.
I don't think anyone's changing their mind. So
That's why I said we could take the
so might as well vote.
Madam Mayor, I believe Ian's in the process of.
Hello,
Yes.
Good, thank you. Go ahead with the roll call.
hello.
You're here, Ian.
I don't have video though. Sorry, I'm not sure.
No
Why
worries.
don't we update Ian with what's going on?
Bruce, I was just about to just
Okay.
try to get it out of my mouth. We are in the middle of taking the vote for allowing, taking the vote for, I'm sorry, the motion to approve or deny an ordinance to amend the City of Lathrop Village zoning ordinance, Articles 2, to add the definitions for cannabis facilities, Articles 3, to add licensed primary caregiver facilities as permitted uses, and to Article 4 to add specific standards for a licensed caregiver. And this will be effective upon publication. And we just did the discussion, and we were about to, and then this is going to be as it's presented without buffers, period. Do you have
Okay.
any discussion that you want around it?
Without buffers, what do you mean buffers?
So there'll be no buffers between the facility and schools, or there was something else regarding the schools and something else. Scott, what was the other thing?
Originally, so with the other uses, retail use and medical marijuana uses, it's being proposed and recommended that there be a buffer between schools, shelters, parks, and potentially in the discussion is religious organizations. Because this is not a retail use, this is simply a grow facility that doesn't have any transfer of product on site. The recommendation from myself and Jill was to move this forward without any sort of buffer restrictions, and the rationale behind that, as I indicated, one is that it's not a retail use, and two, the implementation of buffers, even a reduced buffer distance, essentially eliminates all viable parcels in the office overlay district, which has the effect of zoning this use out of the city, which opens the city up to being potentially having legal challenges and having those uses being located in any zoning district, including the possibility of residential.
And the discussion around it was for both myself and Councilwoman Stallings that uncomfortable with not having any buffers in the schools. So that's where we're at, and we're about to take roll call for it.
And I think.
And what's the reasoning behind your apprehension?
I believe that, and this is what, and I'll say I'm going on intuition, that you can say whatever is going to be in place, that there will be no transfer of products to anyone outside, or, where children won't see that. But we also know that people don't obey the law, and they don't obey ordinances. And I think that protects, if I was a parent, I wouldn't want, I guess I am a parent, my bad, sorry. If I was a parent of a younger child, that would make me feel, uncomfortable with seeing the activity going back and forth. And if I saw anything in the parking lot, it's just, for me, I was still uncomfortable. And so I'm taking it as from a more of a parental aspect of it.
But don't we have ordinances in place to prevent that? And also, don't we have alignment from the police department?
No, that's what I'm saying. The buffer would be that. So again, I guess the way I'm taking it is as much as we all on this call could be law abiding as citizens and that we follow everything to the T in our ordinances, I just, that's just how I feel. And I'm sorry that, that it might not be what everyone else wants to hear, but that's just how I feel. And honestly, let's see, Chief McKee is actually on the line if you would like to hear his opinion.
Oh, sure.
Chief McKee?
I'm sorry, Ian, can you repeat the question? I was listening to Kelly, but I think I may have lost what you're actually looking for.
No, I don't really have a concern. The statement I made was, don't we have alignment to, basically uphold the law through the police department?
Well, I mean, I think it's two different things, whether you have a buffer, a legal buffer, or you're using the police department to enforce, any actions people may be doing to violate the law. I mean, again, we do our best to enforce, any criminal activity or any violations of law. Not that a buffer is going to stop that, but, I think the mayor's concerned about children and having that buffer. So, I mean, that's up to you guys on how you want to handle that.
Yeah, Ian, the other side of the discussion was, was that, right now we have no ordinance in place and primary caregivers can locate anywhere they want in the residential district. So we could have, primary caregivers right now that are within a couple hundred feet of the school. And, I feel anyways that this gives us the ability to control, gives us some control over primary caregivers versus absolutely no control if we don't approve some sort of ordinance.
Right. I agree. I mean, we can't put the cart before the horse, which is what we've been working on for like a year or so now.
I think these types of facilities, they're not retail, and of course, I mean, the mayor is right. There's always a possibility somebody's not going to obey the law and do something. But I think the risk of this type of facility, leading to those kind of actions is probably low. And I think we should allow these facilities to have some place to locate within the city. And if we don't, then we're zoning them out. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't have any real concern about it.
Dr. Sherrill, you had I'm sorry, Chief McKee, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I mean, the ordinance is fantastic for the city, so that way we can regulate it and put some controls on it especially with the odor, having the right filtration system. So, nuisances like the odor that we smell throughout the city. I mean, by at least zoning it and having them in a certain spot and being able to control, have the planning commission look at it and have the plans approved and the systems approved. It's definitely going to make it, I think, better for every resident in Lathrup, because right now, with having no control, there's nothing we can do about it, and we get complaints on a regular basis.
Cheryl, you had your hand up.
I just had a question, and I don't know if Jill had looked at it. If you know what the distance is from the office district to the closest school.
I just responded to you. It's across the street.
Okay.
And you also said in our last meeting that there was a way that you could, and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. I knew I should have wrote it down. It was a way to not include the school in Southfield.
Right. We had looked at saying that schools that were separated from the district by a major thoroughfare wouldn't count. And, at that point, there's still the buffer from the edge from the high school on the western side. And it really seemed as though to have the sufficient amount of parcels to make it a reasonable ordinance, that really wasn't even as critical. I think kind of prioritizing more getting the caregivers, the primary caregiver uses out of the neighborhood and at least onto an area where it's known where they are, they're visible, and it's more, I think it would be easier, it's easier for law enforcement, and Chief McKee might want to talk about that, the difference between patrolling where you know where these uses are versus in the residential neighborhoods where you may not.
So you're saying they are going to be visible? I thought that was part of it, that they were not supposed to be visible.
Well, they're going to be known where they are because they're going to have gone through site plan review. So they'll be, and they'll have business licenses. So we'll know where they are.
I'm just
visible, I meant in that way. But you're right. No, not in the way of like you're driving by and you'll go, oh my gosh, look at all this stuff coming out of the windows.
Yeah, I
So-
agree with Jill. I mean, having the facilities be known and be licensed and be be able to inspect them if need be, I think is the way to go.
And so basically how I'm taking it is that unless we vote on it as is, then we're going against it. And that's not what I'm doing. I'm just asking for a minimum of a 500 feet buffer. Councilwoman Stallings, any input? And honestly, I mean, you can beat a dead horse and you can vote on it, but I know that I'm not, I know I can't be against it. I'm not against it. I just think that
What's the footage right now as far as the buffer?
nothing,
Nothing. So you want 500 feet,
minimally.
the minimum.
But I think we talked about at the last meeting that having that buffer would put us at risk of effectively zoning them out, because you're basically taking a small district and making it even smaller. So, I mean, I guess this is a question for Scott. I mean, aren't we putting ourselves at risk that way of creating a zone that can't really, it has limited ability to be implemented?
Yeah, if there's, and I'm trying to pull up because I know Jill did send me the initial, and I don't know if you have it on your screen, Jill, but the map, just so we could show what it looks like.
Let's see, I do.
I mean, I have it if you, I don't think I can share it though.
Oh, did you find it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay.
Whoa.
So it really, all that's allowing is these three parcels right here would all that would be allowed with a buffer district.
And that was the 1,000 feet and then
This is-
500 across the major road.
Yeah, this is with the major road reduction. So it really, and that's the difference. That's what we're talking about. The difference between with no buffers, it's these blue parcels along the top.
Mhm.
With the buffers, it's these 3.5 parcels right here.
Yeah, so I'll leave my motion as is.
Okay, any other discussion?
Kelly, this is Will. Are we able to jump in with a comment or no?
It's still active on the motion, but why not? Go ahead.
I was wondering, aren't we going to wind up running out of room anyway if we extrapolate this down the road? Because I'm just wondering how many slots are available in those buildings that we've designated, whether red or blue. And if we look basically 2 years down the road and more people want to do this and be caregivers, we're still going to have a space issue.
The issue becomes whether it's not really how much space we have or if we run out. It's whether or not we've provided a reasonable opportunity for this business to locate in the district which we've created for it. So if we create a district and we used to do this all the time as a city, and it wasn't right, but it's what we did. We had a C2 district where all of the uses that were undesirable, and it was in basically Bruce's backyard. That parking lot of the Chase Bank was our C2 district, so that was where the airports went, that's where the farms went, that's where the heavy industrial went, because we had to have a spot for it. And you can't do that. So if we say, all right, we're allowing for this, but we're going to give you 1 parcel, 2 parcels to do it on, it's potentially opening the city up to challenges. And if the court were to agree with the challenger, then the city would not be able to limit it to that district, and that individual could locate in another district wherever they felt it was appropriate. So it essentially has the same effect of us not doing anything if we limit them to a position where they really can't do anything anyway. So I you know, our city's only so big. Our office district, as Jill indicated, is we've identified as being the primary, the most appropriate district for this type of use, this type of intensity. A lot of other communities with a light industrial district or an industrial district are putting these facilities in those districts. We don't have that option, so closest thing we have to that would be the office district. So.
Right, and I had asked at our last meeting to also to give me an idea of what other cities did regarding the buffers for other cities did in this situation.
Didn't Jill address that in the planning commission?
Yeah, I did look because I knew that you had asked that question, and they really vary quite widely. Some communities are large enough that they can have a buffer, some are smaller, they don't have buffers, some are larger and don't have buffers either. Some permit them in industrial districts, some permit them in neighborhoods still. Some permit them in agricultural districts. It's really across the board.
So for just for giggles, just give me an idea of a smaller city with no industrial area. Did they have a buffer?
So like I said, the village of Franklin, they don't have anything at all. So they can be anywhere in the village, no buffers, they could be in residential. And that's a problem that a lot of communities have because this area was kind of overlooked. It came on the scene. Some people got into it, and then the city, I should say, the state legalized medical marijuana and focused on regulations for medical marijuana. And that's what everybody shifted their attention to, and allowing for these medical marijuana facilities and dispensaries. And that's when the city of Lathrup opted out. I'm sorry, we didn't do anything. We didn't opt in because by default with medical marijuana, you were opted out unless you affirmatively opted in. So the city didn't do anything. We were opted out by default. And then came recreational marijuana. And so people started gearing up and focusing on recreational marijuana. Well, now circle back and we found that there's an increasing problem where a lot of people have, because the state doesn't actually license these caregivers, it's simply a registry. There's an issue in some other communities where individuals are registering multiple times as caregivers, and so they're turning these they're buying homes and turning them into grow facilities, and they're far exceeding the number of plants. They're not utilizing any sort of air filtration. Oftentimes they're doing this without obtaining any sort of building permits or electrical permits. They're increasing the electrical consumption, increasing the risk of fire, and doing these all in residential. So a lot of communities are going back now and are starting to do what we're doing, creating an overlay district, putting them in an area, making them go through a site plan approval, get a business license, and then put standards on them so that they aren't just able to do whatever they want. They're held to very similar type standards for the medical and for the recreational. So it's not a huge, I don't think it's a huge market. I think most, the most interest that we're going to have, the people that are going to make the most money are going to be the provisioning centers and the medical and recreational. And that's where I think you're going to see, to answer Will's question, that'll be what's at capacity, I think, before the caregiver district fills up, so.
No, I mean, I appreciate you giving me a city, and that's what I was asking for, Bruce, and no, that was not stated in the planning commission, that there was no city that I could visually in my mind think of. And it's maybe similar, I would say Franklin's probably, well, I don't know the sizes of it. That's what I was asking for, a specific city.
Yeah, it's like Jill said, it's kind of all over the board from what, and a lot of them, I mean, there's a big problem right now. I think it's West Bloomfield. It's been in the paper that they've got a huge issue within their residential neighborhoods. And so they're looking at the same thing that we're doing right now. So.
Gotcha. I appreciate that.
I have a few comments if I may, and it's just a perspective on, maybe the timing of this. The corner of 12 Mile and Southfield used to be a church and school, which would have totally eliminated this corner with the buffer zone. And so I'm not sure what we would have been doing. We would have been probably looking to entertain it in another location within the city.
Too.
What's that, Scott?
I said it could have been a Walmart, and they, eventually they'll probably sell it. So.
Yeah, it doesn't. I guess the question that comes up in my mind is you have the public school system where we had structured school locations that were part of the community, as opposed to more of a private school type setting, which and private schools pop up in facilities that were not originally constructed as schools. Will they continue to be schools? Are they as permanent as schools are intended to be? Does that create a situation where if we approve it with no buffers, Scott, are we in any problem with a change of use, and then suddenly we open it up and say, hey, it's not a school anymore, we put a buffer in place? Would that be problematic?
I guess I'm having a little hard time following. So again, if you're saying if there's a buffer in place and what isn't a school becomes a school, is that problematic?
I'm suggesting that right now we don't. If you approve it without the buffer, and strategically, if the school ceases to become a school, and we're talking very precisely about a facility that's in existence right now, that may not always be a school, you could reinstate or at a later date a buffer if there was an opportunity to put further restriction on it that doesn't impact the area that you've previously designated.
You always have that opportunity to amend the ordinance further if it is if it becomes real problematic and for some reason we're not able to enforce no retail sales at a caregiver facility, and it becomes a real issue where we feel that it's necessary to put that buffer in it. We could always amend the ordinance to do that. It doesn't even necessarily have to be predicated upon that property no longer being a school. So we always have that opportunity. I think as long as we enforce this ordinance as it's written, the signage, these aren't even going to have any sort of signage on them indicating that they're grow facilities. So it's going to be, I think it's a pretty good ordinance as far as being enforceable and being equitable. So it's just, you always have that option.
I think that it's also and I guess I'm being obnoxious, but why not? It's kind of like a what if. I'm hearing a what if we have the buffer, then somebody possibly could go after the city for appearing to lock them out. And then I'm saying, what if somebody doesn't follow the ordinance and it looks like they're, distributing marijuana outside of the facility, so it's.
And I guess the only thing I'd add on to that is that if we don't establish an area that is we would consider, say, desirable, without some sort of change or allowance for some other location, it could continue to exist in a residential area where you could have, in theory, those same problems and without sort of the restrictions in place. So I'm sure there's probably a way to construct an ordinance that allows it in residential and puts this other criteria behind it, but I'm not sure that that's it. And you could substitute residential, you could substitute one of the other zoning categories as well for this. One of the things that I think about with it being on 12 Mile Road is that it's not a highly public or trafficked area where we are, where we would consider, say, versus say the village center, where you're trying to draw traffic too. So if we're considering it as there's the potential for it to be a nuisance, is it any more likely to be a nuisance than one of the other facilities that we'd be considering for that sort of a problem? Or is it more of a nuisance because it doesn't have a high trafficked area and we're still talking about it because of its that risk, you know, whether it's outside of a buffer or closer to a school? Is that any worse of a potential nuisance and an opportunity for you know, let's say illegal activity? I certainly would. I understand, and I understand the perspective of if it's going to be a nuisance, I'd like that nuisance to be further away from school, and I could support that. I'm just trying to figure out how to find a balance here, or how the city could find a balance here to find a location so that it doesn't become a worse situation than you know how we're trying to control it right now. So
and let me jump in here too, just to give you a little bit more of my obnoxiousness of this evening. Technically, where you're talking about putting them on 12 Mile, it does back right up to a residential's backyard. I mean residential, sorry, a resident's backyard. And we do have issues with people that are along 12 Mile that have issues from those businesses interfering with their backyard. So how does that even, you know, how does that look? And you know, and I will say, give you this other caveat, that's where I live. So that's why I know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So how does that, you know, it's a bunch of nuances to it. I just think that for me, again, I'll be done with it. I promise. I know people want to get back to your own life. Is if you put the 500-foot buffer in it, I'll go for it. Not, I'm sorry. Not sorry.
Nope. I understand the position. So, and I'm just trying to get all or a variety of angles at this on the table so that there's more food for thought.
Well, I would be a terrible lawyer because I'm not going to convince you to, I'm not trying to convince anyone to go with me. I'm just convinced, I mean, I'm just saying, when someone sees this recording, when someone complains, you will hear it very loudly that I said that there needed to be a buffer in place, and I will feel good with my conscience. I will sleep all right.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a good place to be far enough away from a residential neighborhood in a community that is small as Lathrup and that is as neighborhood centric as Lathrup is. So it's a narrow needle. I have a needle.
It is. I think we've talked it through. I would like to get to a vote, please.
Well, I was going to ask Councilwoman Stallings if she had anything, seeing that everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Thank you, though.
I know I'm just thinking it through. I'm just thinking it through. I really just still feel strongly about I feel strongly about the buffer for the school system. So, but I'm trying to be objective in hearing what everybody's saying as well. And if you can go back and correct an ordinance, if it, you know, for you, Scott, you had a situation where you said we could go back and rework the ordinance. You can also do the same thing if you find this to be a problem, the no buffer to be a problem, correct?
Yeah, you can,
We
I
can
mean, you can,
always, yeah.
you can always amend an ordinance
Right,
if
we can
it's,
always
I mean,
amend the ordinance, okay.
we do that, we do that a lot, especially,
do
you
it
know,
all
as
the time.
we work through something and it points out loopholes or
Mhm,
shortcomings in our ordinance. We're constantly, they're constantly evolving, so.
mhm.
So
Okay,
you were asking, so you're saying that, and I want to make sure I got this right, Councilwoman, that you're saying if we put the buffer in, that we could always go in and amend it and take it out? Or you meant the opposite way?
no, I'm just saying, you know, the point was that, is that it was the opposite, that if something that turned out to not work well, we would come back to the table and work out the ordinance, rework the ordinance. And so that's all I'm saying, is that it works in both ways, so.
Yeah, I mean, I do have to say though, if someone were to locate in an area that would otherwise be included in the buffer and we amend the ordinance and they're compliant with all other, everything else, then they're illegal non-conforming. So we wouldn't be able to remove them after the fact unless it vacated and sat empty for a period of time.
Anything else? Okay, well, let's do the roll call.
Roll call. Councilmember Siddiqui,
Yes.
Councilmember Stallings,
No,
Councilmember Ferguson,
Yes.
Mayor Garrett,
No.
and Mayor Pro Tem Cantor.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Next on the, for new business, to schedule a public hearing for CDBG program year 2021-2022 on February 22, 2021.
I don't think you need a presentation on that. This is the annual public hearing, and this was an opportunity to schedule that so we can go ahead and get it posted.
I had a question for you on this one. Was this also put in the Southfield Sun?
Oh,
No.
it's going to go in the Oakland Press.
Yeah, I saw that it was in the Oakland Press. I was just wondering, you know, on my weekends and evenings, I peruse some things in writing.
For some discussion.
And I saw that that was a question of why we are going to open.
Yeah, I asked the same question today, so I'll let Cheryl answer.
Yes, so the Oakland Press is less expensive, as well as it gives us more flexibility in publishing. If we use the Southfield Sun, we have to have it in by Tuesday, otherwise it'll be in the next week's paper, which when we're dealing with some of these notices for public hearings doesn't allow us enough time.
For explaining that. I appreciate it. So we don't have to do any approvals or anything on that, right? Just okay. Okay. Any public comment?
Or don't we have to make a motion for it?
I thought you said you didn't have to do anything. Oh, you said that. I'm sorry. I have too much on my brain right now. You said you had to do a explanation of it. Yes, someone needs to make a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to schedule the 2021 Community Development Block Grant public hearing for February 22nd, 2021 at 7 p.m.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Roll call. Councilmember Stallings,
yes.
Councilmember Ferguson,
Yes.
Mayor Garrett,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Cantor,
Yes.
and Councilmember Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, now we're up for public comment if there's any, or I will ask if anybody else wants to just say anything in parting. Anyone? All right, well then, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Unless you don't want to adjourn and we can sit right here.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, well, thank you guys for the lively conversation. I hope you all have a very safe night. Be careful, and hopefully we'll see everyone in sometime soon. Thank you, guys.